What if your messy bedroom, like your bank account, and even the bad weather outside are actually all your fault?
Right, and not just in some metaphorical, everything is connected kind of way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what if every single hardship you experience is an exact mathematical reflection of a flaw in your own morality? Welcome to our deep dive. Today we're looking at a philosophy that claims exactly that.
It's a pretty intense premise to start with.
It really is. We are unpacking an essay written in July of 2020 by an author named Swiffing. It's titled One Way to Know Yourself.
Hmm.
The translation we're using is by Kinyu, and it was edited by Ko-Fear.
Right.
And the mission of this deep dive is to explore the author's incredibly provocative framework for self-reflection. It's basically a worldview where your external reality serves as an unmistakable X-ray for your soul.
But before we jump into the mechanics of how all this works, we really need to establish some ground rules for you, the listener.
Yeah, that's crucial here.
Because the source material we're looking at makes some very absolute and potentially polarizing statements. I mean, the author directly links a person's financial class to their personal virtue.
Which is a heavy claim on its own.
Exactly. And he scales that up to claim that global natural disasters are literally caused by human morality. So our goal today is just to objectively report and analyze the architecture of his philosophical viewpoints.
Right.
We aren't endorsing these claims, nor are we taking sides politically or socially. We are simply mapping out the author's worldview so you can understand the core arguments he's making.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand a claim as massive as, you caused the bad weather, we actually have to start somewhere incredibly small.
Yeah, he doesn't build his worldview from an ivory tower.
Not at all. He builds it from a bed and breakfast.
Yes. The microcosm for this entire grand philosophy is a small B&B he operated for 3 years in British Columbia, Canada.
It's this perfect localized environment.
Right, where he had the opportunity to just observe human behavior on a daily repetitive basis. Through watching hundreds of guests cycle through these rooms, he formulates his theory on human nature.
And he begins to track what he sees as this direct, undeniable correlation between a guest's financial condition and how they physically interact with the space.
Yeah.
And his observations, I mean, they're so specific, it almost reads like a forensic report.
It really does get granular.
He claims that over those 3 years, the guests who had worse financial conditions, people he categorizes as lower middle-class workers, exhibited significantly less self-restraint and self-cultivation.
He details them leaving rooms completely messy.
Right. Debris scattered all over the carpets.
Yeah.
And they would take these snow-white face towels and just throw them on the floor. Or worse, use them to wipe their feet so they were permanently ruined.
Oh, wow. And the list of behaviors goes on. He notes that these specific guests would leave toilets unflushed and smelly. They would bypass the protective covers and sleep directly under the quilts, which, made his cleaning process significantly harder.
Naturally.
They left food sitting on plates. They openly argued with each other. They wouldn't offer basic greetings to people they passed. And they frequently spilled drinks, just permanently staining the pure white sheets.
As someone who loves a crisp, clean white sheet, I honestly physically cringed reading that. But he then contrasts this chaotic environment with his wealthier guests.
According to Swiffing, the guests with better financial situations, those he deemed more intellectual and affluent, they left their rooms cleaner, neater, and were much better at communicating and getting along with others.
Which leads to his core conclusion. He states that a person's financial and social situation directly correlates with their education, their self-restraint, their knowledge, and what he calls their realm and pattern.
Right, realm and pattern.
Let's pause there, though, because I really have to push back on this. To me, connecting a dirty face towel to someone's entire moral realm feels like a massive philosophical leap.
It is a huge leap.
It's like treating a hotel room the way some people treat a rental car.
Yeah.
You know the joke, people drive rental cars a bit rougher, maybe hit the speed bumps a little too hard, simply because they don't own it.
Yeah, it's circumstantial behavior.
Exactly. If they owned the car, they'd wash it every weekend.
Yeah.
But Swiffing is arguing that how you treat that rental car is the ultimate litmus test for your soul.
And that rental car analogy perfectly highlights the friction here. You are arguing for circumstantial behavior, the idea that context changes our actions. But Swiffing's framework completely rejects that.
He doesn't buy the context excuse at all.
Not even a little. To him, the concept of realm and pattern functions kind of like a computer's operating system. If your internal operating system is highly cultivated, it doesn't matter if you own the car or are renting it. The output, the respect for the object, is the exact same.
So the messy room isn't just a transaction.
No, he argues that someone who treats a B and B poorly lacks the internal pattern required to respect their environment at a fundamental level. In his eyes, a messy hotel room is a tangible, physical manifestation of a chaotic internal state.
Which takes us from the physical mess of a hotel room to the metaphorical mess of a person's life. Like if the hotel room's a mirror, then your entire existence is a mirror.
Precisely. And this introduces a central philosophy he cites in the text, stemming from a framework called Lifechanyuan.
Which is his community, right?
Yes, his philosophical and spiritual community, which is centered on the idea of continuous self-cultivation. And the foundational quote he uses from this framework is really heavy. It says, "The world is faultless. All faults lie within us."
The world is faultless. I mean, that is a brutal assessment.
It pulls no punches.
Because he uses that to look directly at the listener. He says, if you want to know yourself, look at your current situation, because it represents you exactly. If you are very poor, if you lack close friends, if you have trouble getting help, and your life is just rough, he insists there must be something fundamentally wrong with you.
He explicitly removes any external scapegoats. It is not because society is unfair or because people are lacking in love or charity.
Right.
In this worldview, all trials and tribulations you encounter are merely reflections of your own consciousness. Therefore, the only way to live a good life is to transform yourself first.
He calls this process building our own soul, doesn't he?
Exactly. The strict instruction here is to never resent or blame others and never blame the society you live in.
So what does this all mean for the average person trying to navigate the real world? Because it entirely removes systemic issues, luck, and historical context from the equation of human struggle.
It's a very absolute way to view reality.
It is. To me, Shufeng is basically describing life as a purely mechanics-driven role-playing video game. In a lot of video games, the system is totally impartial.
Right.
If your character wants better loot or easier levels, you have to manually grind and upgrade your internal stats. If you're constantly failing a level, it's not because the game is rigged against you, it's because your stats are simply too low.
There are no randomized bad spawns in his view of life.
Exactly. If you spawn into poverty or hardship, your internal morality stats required that exact setting.
Expanding on that video game idea, what makes an RPG satisfying to play is the direct correlation between effort and outcome. You grind the stats, you beat the boss.
Yeah, it makes sense mechanically.
While Shufeng's philosophy of absolute internal locus of control sounds incredibly harsh initially, the psychological mechanism behind it is actually deeply empowering for some.
Because you aren't just a victim.
Right. If you believe the world is rigged, you are a victim of circumstance. You have no power. But if you adopt the belief that the world is faultless and you are solely responsible for your suffering, well, you are also solely responsible for your salvation.
It leaves nowhere to point the finger but inward.
Exactly. You hold all the power to change the outcome by upgrading those internal stats.
But doesn't that just ignore the reality that some people start the game with massive disadvantages? Like, the sheer friction of applying this to real systemic poverty is intense.
It is a massive point of friction. Jafang would counter that focusing on external systemic disadvantages is exactly the kind of pessimistic, outward-blaming distraction that prevents a person from cultivating their soul garden.
So even looking at the disadvantages is part of the problem.
For him, yes. The internal mechanism dictates everything, and that mechanism doesn't just dictate your financial state, it creates your entire social reality.
Right, because if your internal state dictates the room you sleep in and the money in your bank, it obviously dictates the people you are surrounded by.
What's fascinating here is he spends a significant portion of the text analyzing communication. He observes that people who are good at communicating have relatively easy, satisfactory lives.
And poor communicators have miserable ones.
Conversely, yes. He argues you can effectively measure a person's worth simply by auditing their social circle.
He goes so far as to say that if you don't have knowledgeable people with big views in your inner circle, it proves that you are just a commoner and that you are destined for a difficult future.
Which logically leads to his prescriptive advice for success. Because everything is internally generated, his advice completely flips the usual societal script.
How so?
He argues that you must prioritize the improvement of your education, your knowledge, and your self-restraint above all else. You should not rush to make money.
Or chase superficial success.
Exactly. Don't glorify your ancestors or try to curry favor with the rich and powerful.
He has this incredibly poetic analogy in the text for this dynamic. He writes, Let yourself be a flower. Butterflies will find you.
It's a beautiful image.
But the flip side is his warning. He says if you aren't excellent yourself, you have no right to detest the flies buzzing around you.
It's a complete reversal of cause and effect. Society teaches us to chase the things we want. Feng teaches that you must become the thing that naturally attracts what you want.
But wait, let's look at how that actually plays out. Is traditional networking completely useless in this worldview?
Under his framework, essentially, yes.
Because his advice sounds like the difference between running around a field with a butterfly net, trying desperately to catch a career opportunity, versus just quietly planting a garden, staying completely still, and trusting nature to bring the butterflies to you.
That's a great way to visualize it.
But does that passive approach actually work in a complex, hyper-competitive modern world?
If we follow his logic to its conclusion, it's the only approach that yields permanent results. Think about your butterfly net analogy. Let's say you aggressively network and manage to catch a very powerful, wealthy butterfly in your net.
Okay, I've got the CEO in my net.
Right. But if your internal garden is essentially dead, if you lack the cultivation, the knowledge, the pattern to sustain that relationship, the butterfly will either escape the moment you lift the net or it will die.
Wow. Because you can't maintain a connection that your internal frequency doesn't match.
Exactly. That's why he says currying favor is useless. The external reality will always eventually snap back to match the internal reality.
Okay, the mechanics of that make sense within his system. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because the author doesn't just stop at your personal bank account or your social network.
No, he takes it much further.
He takes this concept of the internal garden and extrapolates it to the most extreme macro-level conclusion possible. He scales this mirror effect up to global events.
He makes the leap from personal hardship to large-scale natural and man-made disasters, epidemics, massive floods, societal turmoil.
He claims that these global catastrophes are literally caused by human consciousness. He states that when you face an epidemic or a flood, you shouldn't blame the greatest creator for being unjust. And you shouldn't blame other people for being unkind. You invited these disasters upon yourself.
This is where the premise of the world is faultless, all faults lie within us, reaches its absolute apex. In Feng's framework, the universe is not a dead mechanical vacuum. It is a highly responsive, interconnected organism.
So if human consciousness is the root of all reality, then bad weather, war, and disease are simply macro reflections of a collective, negative human mindset.
He argues that if humanity wants favorable weather and world peace, individuals must ensure their thoughts and intentions are not evil or pessimistic.
He says that if you hold on to negative, passive, and pessimistic emotions, your life will become harsher, and the world itself will physically worsen. The philosophical weight of that is staggering.
It is an immense burden to carry.
Blaming a literal geographic flood on personal pessimism. It's like the butterfly effect. But instead of a butterfly flapping its wings and causing a hurricane based on atmospheric physics, it's driven entirely by human morality. Like if I harbor an evil thought today, I am actively contributing to a natural disaster tomorrow.
It places an overwhelming burden of responsibility on the individual. The mechanism he's describing is essentially a macro-karmic feedback loop.
A feedback loop, yeah.
The environment is constantly scanning the collective realm and pattern of humanity and adjusting the physical world accordingly. But he synthesizes all of this complexity down to one very simple concept: the root.
Your fundamental, unshakable quality as a person.
Yes. He states that if you want a satisfactory life, if you want to avoid floods, poverty, and misery, you simply have to change your root.
And he leaves us with a fascinating warning about people whose roots are bad, but who look flashy and successful on the outside. Because we all know people who seem completely uncultivated, maybe even cruel, who are driving luxury cars and living in mansions.
His text addresses this apparent contradiction directly. He states, if one's position cannot match their virtue, then disasters will befall them.
So it's inevitable.
He views external flaunting with a bad internal root as a mathematical impossibility in the long run. The universe will correct the imbalance. The mirror cannot be tricked forever, and the resulting correction will be a disaster for that person.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Feng is presenting us with a worldview that is completely uncompromising. From the trash left on a carpet in a small Canadian B&B to the occurrence of global epidemics, he draws a straight, unbroken line directly to your internal virtue.
It is a philosophy that strips away all the comforting excuses we usually rely on. It offers zero comfort for your circumstances, but it does offer total, absolute agency.
Because you control the engine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If your internal state is the engine creating every aspect of your reality, then everything is within your power to change, simply by tending to your own soul garden.
And that brings us directly back to you, the listener. Whether you completely reject Weifeng's controversial claims about systemic issues and floods, or you find his absolute locus of control empowering, this perspective forces a radical level of personal accountability.
It really makes you pause and evaluate.
It does. If you were to treat your current life situation, your job, your friend group, your messy living room, solely as diagnostic feedback about your internal state, how would your daily choices change? Are you running around with a butterfly net? Or are you doing the quiet work of planting a garden?
It's a great question to ask yourself.
But I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something that pushes the boundaries of the author's absolute confidence in this system. Shuofeng insists that if a person achieves a high position that doesn't match their internal virtue, the universe will step in. Disasters will befall them, he says. The scales will balance.
Right, the inevitable correction.
But looking out at history and looking at the modern world, what happens when we see people with terrible roots? People who lack self-restraint, who treat others poorly, who leave a metaphorical mess wherever they go, seemingly achieve massive lifelong success without ever facing a visible external disaster.
We certainly see examples of that.
The flood never comes for their house. They never lose their wealth. Does reality truly always balance the scales with an external correction, exactly as the author claims? Or is it possible that for some, the disaster isn't an external flood or a public loss of status at all? Perhaps the disaster is just the invisible internal emptiness they have to live with every single day. A disaster that no one else can see, just a deeply uncultivated soul, sitting entirely alone in a perfectly clean but totally empty hotel room.